Hello and welcome to the Supernatural Track here at Continual. I'm your host, Gail Martin, and tonight we are talking about fan fiction platform wars. Which ones should you be on? Which ones should you post your fiction to? Which ones are best for readers, and how did they get that way? But before we get into that conversation, let's let our wonderful panelists introduce themselves, starting with Carole.
Hi, I'm Carole Stokes. I've been a Supernatural fan since season 3. I started writing fanfic in 2012, and I've written until this very day. So I have lots of thoughts about fan fiction and where you put it.
Okay, Lynn.
Hi, I'm Dr. Lynn Zubernis. I'm a clinical psychologist and a professor at Westchester University, and this is kind of what I study. I study the psychology of fandom and especially why it is beneficial for us. I've published 7 books on Supernatural and fandom. I guess not all of them are on Supernatural, but I think 5 of them are on Supernatural and 7 of them are on fandom. The most recent one, Family Don't End with Blood, and There'll Be Peace When You Are Done, were written with the cast of Supernatural and with the fans of Supernatural to get both of those perspectives.
I'm Gail Martin and Morgan Bryce. As Gail, I write epic and urban fantasy. As Morgan, I write urban fantasy, male paranormal romance, but all the modern worlds are ones where Sam and Dean could walk in and feel right at home. I started writing fan fiction back in the 70s, long before any of the platforms on the internet. But I am a voracious reader of fan fiction, and I have tossed a few flash fictions out there as well. So let's talk about what are the platforms out there, and start with what are the best platforms maybe for readers to find fanfic. Carole?
Well, for readers, there's really one giant amongst them all, and that would be our the Archive of Our Own, which is referred to as AO3 because it's Archive of Our Own 3. So Archive of Our Own is a platform that was created by fans. It is not a business in the sense of a profit-making entity. It was started completely for the enjoyment of fans to find what is known as transformative works, which is what the official parlance for fan fiction is. Transformative works means that you are taking something that perhaps somebody else has created, and in a completely nonprofit and loving way have taken those worlds, characters, etc., into new and exciting places. And in order to create a really big unified place for people who are stumbling through the desert and want to find fanfics for their fandoms, it has everything. There probably is not a fandom out there that doesn't have at least one one fiction in there. And some of them countless. I mean, I think Supernatural, I just saw a bar graph the other day that actually was Supernatural, AO3 through the years. And it was this running list through the years of the fandoms that came and went. For instance, when Buffy was on, and Buffy was up, and then, Sherlock was up, and then, different levels of Star Trek was up. But at some point, Supernatural climbed up. And to this day, Supernatural is the big daddy, the big daddy of fanfics out there, and enormous other ones, of course. Marvel, the MCU, I mean, so many anime, manga, bands, music, wrestling, they all have fanfics.
Politics, everything. Politics,
yeah, everything.
even
it's
everything.
There. And so for someone who just wants to find it and find it fast, that's really a go-to spot. It's designed to be read. It's designed to be explored. It's designed for the readers, and therefore is really just incredibly user-friendly.
It's very easy to search and find stories by tags, even if you don't know the author to look for, and you'd go, I want to read a season 6 story. You can find that. I want to read a Samuelette story. You can find that. So that's something that's really awesome on AO3 is the searchability. It's not perfect, but it's a big improvement over some of the other options.
It's enormous. The tagging is just unbelievably vast. As a writer, when you're posting and you want to put tags on so that people will find your story, the bars that you enter it in will, as soon as you start typing something, it'll start dropping down things, like if you type Dean Winchester, it'll be Dean and 18,000 other people, I mean, it's ready to supply you with those tags. And then, yes, so as a reader, you can say, I want to read a story about Dean in outer space in, the year 3000 and, maybe everybody's mermaids. I mean, it's that you can pretty much get about that refined in terms of the tags, in terms of characters, settings, explicitness, whether you want none, a little, some, or gimme the whole ball of wax. Also, if you're going to have explicit, you can narrow down to what flavors of explicitness you would like. And otherwise you can say, I want angst, I want romance, I want fluff, I want, grumpy Jensen, or, submissive Sam, or whatever. And you can just really throw all these tags in there and it will sort it out for you. It's really impressive.
You can also specify relationships, whether or not you're talking about shipping. So if you just want to read a case fic with Sam and Dean, you can specify Sam and Dean, and it's not a romantic ship. If you want a romantic ship, you can get that too. With just about
you cannot have it as well as you can have it. Exactly. If you want to read a story about Charlie and she's the heroine, you can get it. It's all there. So, and they have a huge team, and that's what they do, is wrangle those tags. It's really, really impressive. I think I read, don't they have like 900 people or something working between the languages and the tags and everything. And it's just like, it's really jaw-dropping,
Well, it's true, because you can specify languages, and
there are languages I didn't know were languages. Look at the list and I'm like, that's a language, and this is why. So it was just in the last couple of years, AO3 won a Hugo. And that's why, because its contribution to science fiction, fantasy, that kind of intense, that whole world exploration through fiction, in this case written, but whether it's movies, TVs, literature, etc., the impact it has and had is just so vast. It had to be, that people stood up and said, we have to acknowledge this. And at first there were a lot of people thinking, what, it's a fan fiction site. It's an entity. It's unbelievably not just vast, but so easy to use. It's not hard. You do your first search, you're going to be finding stuff. You can say, I don't know what I'm doing here, and it will take you by the hand and say, do this, now do this, and look, here are the stories.
I still don't really know what I'm doing there, because I just haven't had very much. I usually just, somebody sends me something that I can just click on and I can just read it. I haven't had time to really figure it out, but I believe you that it's probably as easy as you're saying it is. I look forward to someday being not so busy so I can just spend my time browsing AO3. But I think the thing that makes it so important to me is remembering I was in fandom, including supernatural fandom, before AO3 existed, when there was nothing like AO3. And the reason it came about, one of the reasons it came about, and why I think it's so important is that all the other places that existed were owned by someone, were owned by some kind of company who could, if they wanted to, arbitrarily change the rules and just say, now we're not going to allow this, or now we're not going to allow that, or, it was a really interesting place to be as someone who was trying to consume or write fan fiction before there was AO3, never knowing if the platform that you were using was A, going to be around tomorrow at all, or B, was just going to suddenly come through and get rid of tons of fic that was on there because suddenly it didn't meet a new owner's standards. So it was incredibly important to have something like AO3, which is not controlled by someone outside of fandom who can make these arbitrary decisions. And I know from time to time, always when AO3 is asking for contributions to keep it going, which is so important because it is not owned by somebody and making money for someone. Always when that happens, there are people, who are saying, oh, I don't like that they allow this, or I don't like that they don't censor that, or I don't like that you could read anything on here. But really, that's the whole point. And the tagging system is meant to make it a safe place for people to go so they can filter out what they don't want to see without being arbitrarily censoring and being the arbiter of, no, this is okay, but this is not okay. And I think that is so unique and just so important.
Yeah, the tags are definitely not, they serve the dual purpose because they bring readers in. You tag things as a writer because you're like, oh, come read my story. I wrote about this, I wrote about that, but also to say, this is in here, this is in here, this is in here. And so if you don't want to read those things, it's right there. Don't read it. Or, at least go in forewarned. You can say, well, this is in here. And so if you read it, it's on you because we told you it's right here. Now, some of that, of course, depends on the writer tagging. But the point is the ability is there. And I think most writers really do, because most writers in general don't want to lose a reader because they did something icky to them. They want to make the readers happy. They want readers to like their stories. And even when you're doing something dark and thought-provoking, you want your reader to like that dark, thought-provoking story. So most writers, I think, do tend to be very careful and thorough. Maybe newer writers at first kind of don't realize how far they could tag, but it's a here come in, but also here's the boundaries. So mind those fence lines if that's something you're not comfortable with.
Yeah, and there were content warnings on AO3 long before we started talking broadly about trigger warnings. And it's something I kind of miss in regular fiction and I'm seeing some of the younger authors who have come up through AO3 starting to do this even in some of their Amazon descriptions for a non-fandom book. I can tell who has written or consumed fan fiction from the way they describe it in their blurb. And I'll go out privately and go, you came up through AO3, didn't you? But I love that because I hate to get into the middle of a long story or a book and find out this is not going the way I want my recreational reading to go.
Right.
I didn't want them to kill off the love interest. I didn't want to cry. I didn't, or it's just gone somewhere that isn't my thing. I love knowing that up front so I can pick and choose. And I think that is so rich with AO3.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's just like, when you go to the bookstore and you read the little flap, or you read the little blurb on the bag, you want to find out a couple of things just to see, do I even want to read this story? And it's like that, but just a little bit more, so that, you don't have something. I mean, if you read War and Peace, there's going to be a lot of people are going to die and there's a war and, there's a lot of unhappiness. You don't need text for that. But
it's in the title and it's Russian. Everybody dies.
But, a lot of, stories are not necessarily, especially speculative stories, sci-fi stories, fantasy stories, aren't that cut and dried because part of their whole appeal is the fact that they could go anywhere. you know, that anything can happen, that these are worlds that are created completely out of imagination and not necessarily based on, you know, what in our muggle world, you know, that we're used to.
Now, the new kid on the block, and then we'll come back and talk about some of the legacy systems that were there, you know, early. But Dreamwidth seems to be the new kid on the block. That's where a lot of people have kind of migrated with some of the churn on Twitter and AO3, not AO3, Twitter and LiveJournal and Tumblr. I have not ventured out on Dreamwidth. What are the pros and cons of Dreamwidth for writers and readers? Anybody familiar enough with it to venture a comment?
All I know is that it's not really very new. It came about with it was the very first alternative to LiveJournal way back in the day. The first times that LiveJournal was going to go over, many years ago, everybody opened a Dreamwidth with the same account as their LiveJournal account in case we had to quickly migrate over to Dreamwidth. That said, I don't really, I think it's very similar to LiveJournal.
It's really a clone. I think it's based on the same or open source code, open source code that LiveJournal is. So LiveJournal, and you kind of can't help talking about LiveJournal and you have to kind of talk about them together because one was birthed from the other and really, you know, came into existence because of that. So you had LiveJournal, which was the happening place for, I think, for years. I mean, not just for fandom. I mean, LiveJournal is a blog site. And so people went there for all kinds of reasons. You know, if you were a lonely housewife in Finland, you could go online and find people all over to chat with. And that's really what it, you know, what it was for. Fandom, of course, seized that ball and ran with it. And it was really wonderful to say, oh, here I am in New England, and I'm talking with fans in Australia, in Germany, in South America, you know, in Japan, you know, just all over. And we're all talking about it and sharing it, and stories are being shared, art is being shared. And one of the great gifts of it was that, so I could make my post, here's my story, and there'd be many communities, and I could throw my story into all these communities, you know, so that other people who I'm not even friends with could see my stories and find, you know, and I say, I'm talking about my stories, but of course, this is everybody who wrote, this is what they did. And you would send it out to communities, and then it would go out here, there, and everywhere. And people could comment to you directly, and you could have a dialogue. And that was, I think, the great gift of LiveJournal was the dialoguing. I mean, you would have comment threads for days, you know, depending on what was happening. And you know, not just talked then to the writer, but then as the other people chimed in, you could have a comment thread with, like, you know, 15 people all talking about, you know, in this great conversation. That is really, to my mind, as yet unparalleled. You do not have that anywhere else at this point that matches that for the range, the immediacy, and the interactiveness, plus the space to, first of all, make your own posts, where you can talk about just everything and anything. And, you know, you don't worry about, am I going to get readers, or, you know, like on Twitter, and you're like, oh, am I getting followers, or, you know, and I'm in there. I'm like, oh, look, I have followers, you know. But here it was like, I'm going to share all of my thoughts, and everybody else is sharing theirs, and we're all sharing them together, including fandom. And it was rich, and it was delicious, and, you know, it was incomparable. So LiveJournal got sold to Russia, or to Russians. Russians bought LiveJournal, and that was the first great you know, panic, the first LiveJournal panic, because we're all like, what's going to happen? Are they going to shut it down? And especially fandom, like, how are they going to feel about, you know, fan fiction and all of this stuff? So Dreamwidth was born. And everybody I know, including me, everybody I know went and made a Dreamwidth, because really all you had to do was import your LiveJournal. which doesn't get any easier than that. Well, it would take a few times, but at some point it would import your live journal over. And then everybody just left them there. You just wanted to have that backup so that if the plug got pulled, everything was not lost and you didn't lose your friends and you didn't lose your stories and stuff. And so there was a little doom with surge, and then really in my world, it really died down and everybody kind of ignored it for a while, or maybe they posted there, but they always cross-posted to LiveJournal because that's still where more people were. And then we had the war in the Ukraine, and there was a second mass surge to Dream With, and everybody like me who had a Dream With updated, re-imported to update, because who knows if communications were going to get cut off. We didn't want to lose all that, our blogs and our stories again and everything. But the great thing, this was beautiful to behold. Everybody at this point now is like, fan fiction, of course, does predate AO3. And there are many writers who were around when AO3 was growing, but didn't necessarily start posting there before they phased out of fandom, And so there was a mass gasp at the thought of there could be oodles, thousands of stories that could be lost because they're not on AO3. And this enormous bucket brigade started, where there was a whole group of people, and they're like massive spreadsheets were being made and lists, and it was like, okay, you take here and you take here and you go check on this writer and you check on that writer. Okay, their stuff's on AO3. Okay, go over here and do this, and bringing things over into AO3 so that should LJ go down, those stories would not be lost. Now there are a couple other platforms that have done similar things, but that's just the LJ one. Unfortunately, LJ has declined under the impetus of many new, partly with these two massive blows that, even though they were not substantiated as we deemed them to be risk-wise, nonetheless, people moved to Facebook, Twitter got going. Tumblr is up and, is out there. And those all have their own pluses and minuses, which I'm sure we're going to talk about once I stop talking. But so LJ has declined a lot. It's the kind of the old lady now, in a way. Still, the benefits haven't been matched, but a lot of people now either have moved from it, and now you have the younger generations who are unfamiliar with it, only use it like if they really have to, or put the plea out to say, can someone help me do this?
To which people find anything on
people
LJ.
Like I are like, yes, what do you need? Come here, I will help you. Yes, here's the code.
If somebody sends me a link to a story on LJ, I will go look for it. And I have found SPN story finders on LJ, which you can say, I'm looking for a story with Sam and Dean in Oregon eating lasagna. And people will come up with a gazillion stories like that.
With meat sauce or without?
Right. But I admit that even if I go out to an author's page trying to find the master list of their master posts, boggles me. Now, Lynn, you have been with LJ for a long time. You're a big LJ fan. Tell us what we're missing.
I mean, Carole already did say a lot of what we're missing. It's a completely different type of platform. So it was used in a completely different way. And when I first discovered Supernatural way back in the beginning of time, when it first came on the air, LiveJournal was the only social media platform that fandom was on. There was no other platform, it's really hard to fathom now that an entire fandom was online in the same virtual space. Now it's fragmented over 20, 30, I've lost count of how many online platforms. So can you imagine, like, if there was another Supernatural fan and you were looking to interact with them, there was only one place to go to find them. We were all there in the same space, which was just unbelievably powerful as far as building community and building cohesion. The other thing that made it just tremendously good for building cohesion is that, as Carole said, it's a blogging platform. It's not an archive. It's meant to pull for people writing personal journal entries. So the people who I met in the supernatural fandom on LiveJournal a million years ago, I got to know those people like they were my best friends. And I still am so close to many of those people because every day, every day we all posted, like it was like reading your best friend's diary every day. We all put our lives onto LiveJournal. It wasn't really just about the fan fiction. That was a part of it, but it was about connecting with other people who loved the same thing that you loved. And then the idea of communities, it doesn't work in the same way, Gail, as it used to, as far as finding things, because the communities are no longer active. Back in the day, every day there were postings to the major fan fiction communities, and you would just check all of those communities would be on your feed. So here's what new was posted with this pairing today, and here's what was posted on this. And then there was a
or even all encompassing ones, like there was all underscore SPN, remember that one? And every day it would just have, here's every news about anything with supernatural today, you know, and sometimes it might be little, but other, here's pictures, here's some stuff that came out in the press, here's this, here's that. And you would have that on your feed. And so every day you'd kind of get, oh, look, here's some new stuff happening. And then this community would be like, oh, we're going to post these stories, or we're going to, this challenge. And
you'd literally know what was happening in the entire fandom every day.
Oh,
and there
wow.
was even one of the things that I missed the most. There was a wrecking community called Crack Impala, which existed to recommend the best fan fiction. And I was a part of it for a while. It was so well done. These people put so much time and energy into reading everything that came out and then sifting through it for you and saying, here's the 5 best things that came out today. And like, for someone who's busy, that was wonderful. That was just like, okay, well, if I want to read the best things that came out today, here they are right here.
Or then communities that, not necessarily challenge oriented, but it were like, here's a community that focuses on her comfort. So if her comfort's your thing, they'll be always featuring new her comfort stuff, or new this or new that. So there was all kinds of different flavors, once again, at your fingertips. You didn't have to look for them, or you could just, throw them on your feed. And then every day as you looked at your feed, you'd be like, oh, here's, it's like your AP scroll, And I just want to mention one other aspect of it being a blog site. Yes, fandom. We were all into the fandom, but the other thing was we didn't just talk about our fandom. We talked about ourselves. So I would talk about writing stories, but I would also talk about, my kids. And back in my day, it was, dealing with mental health issues, or dealing with, this, that, or the other thing, and learning karate, whatever was happening in my life was on my blog. And that's how everybody was. So I didn't just know that this person was a wonderful artist. I knew that they were taking care of their aged parent. And I knew that, they were vegetarian and they like to travel, and the things like that enrich your friendship. So it's not just this one aspect of it. It's everything about them that has become your friend. And on a site like that, it's much easier to do that because everyone's sharing so much more. I made some wonderful friends on Twitter, but when I get to know them in person more is when those friendships deepen, because it's everything. It's not just here's our fandom bond, but here's our bond as people. Here's our complete person bond. And that's what you got on LiveJournal.
Well, and the big bangs then came out of those communities.
Yes. So Lynn, I don't mean to just rattle on here. So just
Oh, I'm just agreeing. I mean, if I disagree with you, I'll let you know, Carol. I'll be like, no, Carol, you're wrong.
You're wrong. Uh, the communities focused at first just on like different things they were interested in. Like I said, maybe it was hurt comfort, maybe it was, various shipping, we're in this ship, we're in this ship, we're in that ship. But then the community started creating challenges. And the challenges are when they would say, we're going to set up these parameters that if you are a writer, you sign up, you are going to write a story of this approximate length. It has to have these characteristics and you have to have it ready by a certain time. And that's a challenge, or a bang. That's a bang. And bangs exist in everything. There's the cinema bang where you take a movie and you redo it as a Supernatural or J2 story. There's one of the more whimsical ones is the meant to be, where it's Harlequin romance blurbs and you rewrite them. So you're rewriting these well, I think they're original blurbs, but it's the style of a Harlequin romance, all like, oh,
They're also the Eldritch Horror Big Bang,
Eldritch Horror bang, exactly. So, and they're fascinating. They're wonderful as a writer because they're challenging. They're super fun. You try things, or you write something that you really love, and you could write in an ABO bang or a shifter bang or a sci-fi bang or a Regency bang. They're just so fun.
And you get to collaborate with an artist, which I think is such a unique thing because, lots of times writers are not artists and artists are not writers, but they're both loving the same thing. So many of the challenges pair up a writer and an artist of some kind to create together, which it's just wonderful. What a wonderful opportunity to collaborate with someone to bring like a shared vision to bear. It's such a unique thing. And it strikes me as so much of what I at first found so wonderful about fandom. I still do find it wonderful about fandom, but I think back in the early days of LJ, it seemed very utopian to me because while there was certainly infighting and in-group, out-group kind of things, LiveJournal didn't pull for as much controversy because people tended to stay in their own communities, and the communities were around different things. So if you shipped these particular characters, you belong to that community. If you ship two different ones, you belong to a different community.
Yeah.
If you didn't ship anything, you belong to that community. And that means you didn't see what the people in the other communities were posting. Whereas now, the
It's all in
shared
their
platforms,
everybody's face all the
yeah,
time, yeah.
everybody's interacting with everyone. So if there are things that you really don't like, they still might be in your face unless you're really good at curating your timeline. So there is a lot more controversy and a lot more infighting. Not that it wasn't always there to some extent, but because of the way the platforms are structured, there's a lot more of it in fandom now, which is a shame.
It's much more volatile.
And as a reader, the Big Bangs are a terrific place to find a whole bunch of something you like in one place. And you can just go down the list because there'll be a master post of the 2015 Big Bang for, case fix, and the 2016, the 2017, and there's a master post of master posts. And so you can keep yourself, as long as you have food and water and the heat doesn't turn off, you can be very happy on the couch for a very long time, just going through the Big Bang
Absolutely.
master posts.
Yeah.
And you're not going to run out of material anytime in your lifetime. And as a reader, that's just like hitting.
Oh yeah, it's like Candyland. Yeah, if you hit any of the bangs, and they will all have a master post. Here's, okay, this bang is now closed, all the stories have been submitted, and then boom, here's the master list, and it's just up there. And you can go back to, I think the Big Bang started in 2009. And
no,
was it
before
earlier?
that,
Okay.
2006, I think.
Okay, so you can go back. Those lists are there now. Some of the stories may not be there if a live journal has been purged or something, but you can go back there and those lists are there and you can read through them and find writers that you never heard of. You know, we think, oh, these are big writers, but you know, all these other writers are like, wow, some of these were amazing.
The really incredible thing too is that for the Big Bang, the SPN J2 Big Bang, the one that was, I think, the
Yeah.
first challenge.
I always think of it
one.
as the queen jewel.
Yeah, and it has been run by the same individual since 2006 and its beginnings. I think that is just absolutely extraordinary.
Yeah, every year we're kind of like, she's going to do it. Is she going to do it?
Just like, are you going to do it? Are you going to do it?
And
And
two
we're
others that
we're
I'll
like,
throw,
okay, we can have it in 2003. We're going to have it. We're going to have it.
two others that I'll throw out there that are kind of legacy sites that are still plodding along, but for a reader, maybe more so than a writer, it's good to know that you might find some content out there that you might not find elsewhere, and that's fanfiction.net and Tumblr. Tumblr, of course, went through its problems when, like, I think somebody was saying it got bought. They decided they wanted to Disneyfy it. They tried to take off all the grown-up stuff, and then everybody surprisingly left.
Go figure. The grown-ups all left.
And now that everybody's watching the dumpster fire over on Twitter, people have started to kind of migrate back under the radar to Tumblr, which decided it may have made a mistake. Fanfiction.net, all I've got to say as a reader is, I hope you have really strong glasses with a lot of magnification, because it does not expand well even on a screen. And so there's some good stories out there that aren't other places, but it's going to tax your eyesight. Any comments on those two sites? Because they're still around and there's still stuff out there, and I don't know if anybody's adding to them.
It's funny, I never really have read on fanfiction.net at all. I tried to maybe a little bit in the beginning, but most of the people who were writing the stuff that I thought was really incredible seemed to be on LiveJournal. So I think I just stuck to LiveJournal. So
Yeah.
I don't really know how to navigate fanfiction.net. I haven't ever really read on it.
That's pretty much me too. I went there and it's really clunky. It's really clunky. And I was just like, I just don't have like time for this. Because I was comfortable navigating in LiveJournal, and then there was AO3, and it was like, why, you know, I know there used to be this is an old site that doesn't exist anymore. It was called Sinful Desire, but they did archive at AO3. And when you're reading at AO3, you will run across, this was archived from, you know, Sinful Desire and stuff. And so that was one of the ones I was talking about, that at least when it went down, they did bring a lot of it over, you know, to save it, you know, which was good, because it too had a lot of good stories.
There have been several like that were created and then ported over just because the site or the originators, you know, moved. Now, podcasts are another piece that can be based on fiction, or, as Carole knows, they can be discussion based on different topics. And Lynn, I know you've interacted as a guest, particularly on a lot of podcasts. Where can people go to find those?
I have no idea. I just, when people call me, so I did one this morning, when people call me and say, will you be a guest on my podcast? I try to say, okay, but I never really go looking for them myself. So I don't know. Carole, do you know? You have one.
Well, first I want to clarify, when you're talking about stories, so are you talking about stories that have been done in an audio format?
That have been done as a podfic, yeah.
A podfix. Yeah, I keep it. Podfix are stories
different.
that have been audio presented.
Right.
I enjoy them. I've done some. I love to do them. I really looked into doing audio work at one point, but I just didn't have the time, because then you have editing and stuff. And I'm like, I can write or I could do that. So I'm going to write. It doesn't mean I won't do them once in a while. So podfics are really just up to the artist, you know, and then they will get posted. They get posted on AO3. You can go on AO3 and look for podcasts you know, you got me saying it. Podfics. A podcast would be more like the discussion format. And I actually didn't know there were that many out there about fan fiction and supernatural. And I'm kind of learning that's, you know, I was in arrears on that. I was recently a guest on Idling in the Impala, which is a podcast from an American woman and a British woman. And it was extremely fun. And they're talking about fan fiction and supernatural and cons and all of this stuff. And it was just delightful. And can I mention? So a couple of us who were guests on that, a couple of friends of mine and I were guests and enjoyed it so much that we just recently started our own podcast, which we have one episode on so far. One's recording tomorrow, called So Get This, The Lore of Supernatural Fanfic. And those are on Spotify. You can search for them. And I think pretty much, when I learned about Idling in the Impala, I was just like, oh, and it turns out there's stuff out there. You just basically, if you Google it, or you can go to Spotify and do searches and you'll find stuff. It's just like anything. You just kind of have to say, oh, I'm going to look at this. Or then as you start, depending on how vast your presence is, I don't mean your presence, but how exploratory you are on a platform such as Twitter or Tumblr, you will see things come up as people are, talking about them, and not even in a promo way, but just like, oh, I heard this thing, and oh, I heard that thing, and oh, I heard this fic, and they're out there. So yeah, you can check them out.
Well, and fiction adjacent, you've got a lot of book discussions or fan fiction discussions that are ongoing on places like Discord. So they might not be places where people are actually posting fic, but they're talking about the fiction in a kind of closed, safe, hopefully, environment. Now, the
Right.
trick there is finding them and then getting invited to them, because it's not like just searching for them on AO3. But if you want to talk about the fiction you've read and not just kind of read it on your own, that's a nice fiction adjacent thing and another place to get, deeper into the community. And Lynn, I know you some of the book clubs and some of those things.
Yeah, I think, the closest thing that has come to replicating that feel of sort of somewhat cloistered communities where you find like-minded people are the Discord groups. So yeah, there's a bunch of them. There's one that was started for Family Don't End with Blood it's a book club and they were reading Family Don't End with Blood, and they'd started a Discord, and after they finished that, they all enjoyed it so much they read another book and then another book, and now it's been going on for, I don't know, 4 years maybe now.
Wow.
They've had all kinds of guests. A bunch of the actors who wrote chapters in my books have dropped into the Discord and interacted with the book club. So that is a nice thing, I think, because people know that they are with like-minded people, whatever the Discord is organized around. So that has been a little bit of a replacement for some of that intimacy and that sense of, like, we used to call LiveJournal the safe space, because that's how it felt. It felt like you could be real there and talk about what you really liked with people who would get it. And Discord feels like that too, because it's not a public platform.
It's like you're being invited into somebody's home.
Mhm.
So here's my server is my home. And then in this room, we have this, and in that room, we have that. And then if you want to go in that room, there's another thing. And, the bar is over by the kitchen.
Yeah. Well, and I want to give a shout out to the Winchester Family Business blog. It's certainly not a huge repository of fanfic like AO3 or those things, but it does host some original fanfic, including a couple of my flash fictions that were illustrated by the fantastic artist Catherine Cole. And there's a number of other stories that are out there. So along with all kinds of caption this and news and articles and episode reviews and everything else, but it actually does have a small repository of original fanfic that you might not find elsewhere, because I know mine isn't posted anywhere else. So just something, if you're looking for fresh meat, new fodder, it is a place to check out. Well, folks, as usual, we've blown through our time. So, and there's always more to talk about, but thank you so much. Tell everybody, please, where we can find you online. Lynn?
You can find me on pretty much most of the social media at Fangasm SPN. And I also have my own website, fangasmthebook.com, where you can find not fan fiction, but a lot of articles and interviews and information about the books too.
Awesome. And Carole.
You can find me on Facebook in the continual panels and in Gail's TFWNC group. Online, Fire Sign 10, all of my fictions on AO3 under Fire Sign 10. And you can also find me on Instagram as Fire Sign 10. All of my other social media links are there, as well as the podcast. So Get This, the Lore of Supernatural Fanfic is also on Instagram and Twitter.
And I'm pretty easy to
Find
find.
the tags.
Find the tags, yes. I'm pretty easy to find at gailzmartin.com, morganbryce.com. I'm on all the social media. If you spell the names right, you'll find me. I do some supernatural music videos on TikTok and some of the short video formats. I also do run the Supernatural TFWNC group on Facebook, and I'm a columnist for the Winchester Family Business, but most of the time I'm here on Continual. So thank you both so much for being here and a wonderful discussion. And thanks to all of you for watching and listening. There will be more Supernatural coming up on Continual, so we'll see you online.